While we have explored space and sent people to the moon, one area that remains a bit of a mystery is our own brain, in particular the different processes and operations our brains perform every day. Recent research has tried to show a link between physics and decision-making, and now a model using quantum physics to explain how we decide between two or more options has been published. A recent study has shown that robots perform well as language teachers. Robots are machines that look like humans. They usually have a face, arms and legs. Because they are patient, children seem to enjoy learning with these machines. The robots will repeat the same words or tasks again and again. However, it is unclear whether robots can replace all roles a teacher has in the classroom. The haiku, one of the briefest forms of poetry, that hails from Japan. We'll come on to specific examples, but first you may have the misconception that the haiku is governed by strict rules that need to be adhered to. Actually, there is more flexibility, less constraint than you may imagine. What defines a haiku is that it is the experience, pure and simple. The writer's feelings or opinions should not permeate the text, for there is no room for them, neither in the word count nor the form itself. Here's a famous haiku for you to consider. Scientists believe they may have discovered the smallest dinosaur remains ever found. Working in Myanmar in Asia, they uncovered a tiny, 7 mm long skull. Their find is thought to be fully grown and experts estimate it to be around 99 million years old. Both a bird and a dinosaur, the skull is about the same size as the world's current smallest bird, the bee hummingbird. Although the skull is similar to modern birds, there is evidence that it had up to 23 teeth, making it very different to birds we know. It's relatively easy to envisage what you'll be doing next week, but imagining a more distant future can be challenging because it feels so abstract. We tend to fall back on memories of the past to construct our visions of the future, but it's harder to guess which past memories will prove pertinent in making sense of things that are more distant. Research suggests that people who plan for failure are best equipped when problems arise. To do that, though, we need to picture ourselves in the distant future and predict what specific obstacle we may confront. Counselor, your tutor says you're rather quiet during tutorials. Student, yes, I don't always feel confident about speaking in front of other students. I do all the reading for preparation, but there's a lot of it and sometimes there are things I don't understand. Counselor, well, part of the purpose of a tutorial is to clarify anything you didn't understand in the reading, so you shouldn't feel embarrassed about asking questions. And if the reading load seems quite heavy, you can always ask the tutor what the real priorities are. We use skeletal muscles to move. They're attached to our bones and when they slide together, they pull our bones in different directions, which allows us to make all sorts of movements like walking, jumping, bending, smiling, and even blinking. If you don't use a group of muscles for a period of time, they can become weaker, so to avoid this you should exercise regularly. By exercising at a level that you find difficult, you strengthen your muscles. When you work hard like this, muscles are slightly damaged and they then repair and rebuild, becoming stronger. So, looking at the product life cycle, a product reaches maturity following the growth stage. This can be a daunting time for manufacturers who want to extend the life of the product and prevent a subsequent downward curve. But how to increase the appeal while retaining the product's identity can be a conundrum. If we look at confectionery, there have been attempts to reinvent types of chocolate by going from a bar to individual pieces, for example. Varying the flavor is another common strategy. Here are some examples of this. Online exercise is not a new phenomenon, but how effective is it? Well, the technology is developing all the time and becoming more interactive. One example is a program that ballet dancers are using. They're able to see themselves on screen as though in a full-length mirror. The instructor is also evident as a visible yet indistinct figure. Those who pay more have a digital version of a two-way mirror enabling their instructor to see them in order to receive bespoke feedback. So getting what you pay for is undoubtedly true here. The extension of slavery into new territories and states had been an issue as far back as the Northwest Ordinance of 1784. When the slave territory of Missouri sought statehood in 1818, Congress debated for 2 years before arriving upon the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This was the first of a series of political deals that resulted from arguments between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces over the expansion of the peculiar institution, as it was known, into the West. British commanders had indeed learnt the lessons of the Crimean War, and could adapt themselves to battalion and regimental columns maneuvering in jungles, deserts, and mountainous regions. What they failed to comprehend was that when they came up against the Boers, all their tactical and technical skills were of little use because they had entirely failed to comprehend the trench fighting and cavalry raids of the American Civil War. In 1899 all arms of the British service went to war with what was to prove antiquated tactics, and in some cases antiquated weapons. The internet has played its part in the brand bard propagation, but it has also produced a mountain of alternative, more contemporary content upon which we could choose to feast. And yet it is Shakespeare who has risen to the top. And not just online, where he's looked up so much that there are now bespoke Shakespeare search engines. It was the rise of local monocultural nationalism that led to the breakup of the empire, when Slav nationalism resulted in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austrian throne, on June 28, 1914, and Austria-Hungary was catapulted into the armed conflict that became World War I. The post-World War II European space of a European Union of states with free movement of people and of goods and pan-European human rights legislation at its center could be seen as resurrecting the Austro-Hungarian model. The Civil War marked a defining moment in United States history. Long simmering sectional tensions reached a critical stage in 1860 to 1861 when 11 slaveholding states seceded and formed the Confederate States of America. Political disagreement gave way to war in April 1861, as Confederates insisted on their right to leave the Union and the loyal states refused to allow them to go. Once again, history repeats itself. The instability in the environment around the world is on the rise, with many regions on edge. Yet this time around there are many countries with nuclear weapons capability, and so the stakes are much higher. In recent months we have been witness to a rise in random terrorist attacks and conflicts all over the world like the ones given below. There are a high number of publications and web pages about spiritual topics, and there are an equally high number of publications containing information from spiritual beings, which have been received through channeling. The quality, truthfulness, and reliability of such information must be assessed case by case. A universal judgment is not possible. It can be very fascinating to hear or read about the work, purpose, and tasks of non-incarnated beings. However, for most of us, such information is useful at best for entertainment. If we, respectively our soul, wanted to learn about the interrelations in the spiritual world, why then should we incarnate at all? Our soul could have stayed in the spiritual world. The interrelations of the spiritual world are certainly easier to grasp while you indeed are in the spiritual world. If you currently were in the rainforest with the goal to understand the system of the rainforest better, would you then for this purpose drive to the desert? Whether India and the US are signing a new extradition treaty or amending the existing one is somewhat unclear, but there is no doubt that India's extradition requests have usually been turned down by Western democracies. For instance, when India requested the extradition of the JKLF leader, Aminullah Khan, who was visiting the US 4 years ago, a US law court turned down the Indian request. So did a judge in Belgium when Khan went to Belgium. The reason is that our extradition treaties with all Western nations forbid the extradition of a person on 2 grounds: I, if he is caused or convicted of an offense of a political nature, and 2, if he won't get a fair trial in the country requesting his extradition. Unfortunately for India, its human rights record is so dismal that Khan had no difficulty convincing a US and Belgian judge against his deportation on the ground that Indian law courts would be severely prejudiced against him. Past experience shows that US and European judges have been sympathetic to fugitives whose extradition India has sought. At a time when more soldiers are committing suicide than are dying in battle, it is well to remember that, no matter how thoroughly indoctrinated the belief in the superiority of an abstraction, there remains within each of us a powerful life force that can never be fully repressed. What Gandhi called satyagraha, a truth force or soul force, remains deep within us as, perhaps, the greatest power at work upon each of us. The state, and the civilization it is helping to bring down, will continue to fight this life force in every conceivable manner, not simply in the war system, but in efforts to regulate even the most minuscule details of life's expressions. Land reclamation has been carried out along the coast of Tokyo Bay since the Meiji period. Areas along the shore with a depth of less than 5 meters are simplest to carry out landfills, and sand from the floor of Tokyo Bay is used for these projects. The topography of the shoreline of Tokyo Bay differs greatly from that of the pre-modern period due to ongoing land reclamation projects. Tokyo Bay includes about 249 square kilometers of reclaimed land area in 2021. Aggregate household waste production is enormous in Greater Tokyo. There is little room for traditional garbage disposal sites. Waste is rigorously sorted at the household, much of it is turned into ash, and further recycled into Bay landfill. A conventional sales are when the home is owned outright or the seller owes less on the mortgage than fair market value. Conventional sales involve quicker transactions between both parties. Unlike foreclosures, short sales and probate sales, we typically recommend conventional sales for our buyers, especially first-time homebuyers, to help them avoid the complications they could run into when dealing with distressed properties or probate sales. For a majority of buyers who are looking to purchase and move into their dream home as soon as possible, conventional sales are the way to go. Oftentimes, distressed properties can take many months for the seller's bank to approve an offer or for a court date to be set in the case of a probate sale. The Knowledge Challenge invites proposers to submit proposals for research activities aimed at improving our basic understanding of entrepreneurs and the levers, tools and methods that can advance entrepreneurship in the United States. The Knowledge Challenge is open to proposers conducting research in universities and academic institutions, laboratories, companies, nonprofit organizations and as individuals. Collaborations between academic researchers and entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship support programs and other entrepreneurial ecosystem. Builders are welcome. The Knowledge Challenge may grant up to $400,000 annually for project teams, up to $150,000 annually for individual researchers, including hiring contract or research assistants, and up to $30,000 annually for students or student teams or doctoral researchers. Understanding Migration was conceived in response to numerous requests from educators and curriculum specialists concerning the presentation and discussion of issues related to human migration in the social studies classroom. What are the reasons that large groups of people have found themselves moving from place to place? What effects does this movement have? And most importantly, how can such a fluid and nebulous concept be presented in a classroom in an easy-to-follow manner with clear lesson objectives and outcomes? Regional case studies were chosen to address these and other essential questions. Where possible, we have used primary source documents to present the information in each case study. Secure Financial Messaging Services provider SWIFT said today that it has expanded the GPI tracker system to help banks track their global transactions at all times, keeping full vigil on the payments activity. Extension of its GPI tracker will cover all payment instructions sent across the network, SWIFT said in a statement. If you are employing a builder, the responsibility will usually be theirs, but you should confirm this at the very beginning. You should also bear in mind that if you are the owner of the building, it is ultimately you who may be served with an enforcement notice if the work does not comply with the regulations. Some kinds of building projects are exempt from the regulations, however generally if you are planning to carry out building work as defined in Regulation 3 of the Building Regulations, then it must comply with the building regulations.